Hello and welcome to On-Set Secrets.
I'm Nicole.
And I'm Charlotte.
And we're lifting the curtain on what life is really like working in film, TV and video production. So our guest today is the amazing Stella Moss. She's an intimacy coordinator, which is a fairly new role in the production landscape, but one that is so needed. But she's worked for 10 years across the industry before now being an intimacy coordinator. Her approach to intimacy is intuitive, authentic and collaborative. And I think you can really see that throughout our discussion. She has been known most notably for her stage and screen work,
Ether, Solas United and Sister Wives, and has also worked in theatre on shows such as After Sex. Welcome, Stella.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. What is an intimacy coordinator for people who have no idea?
Great question. So an intimacy coordinator is effectively a liaison between the cast, between the director, and between production when it comes to scenes of an intimate nature. That could be including nudity, that could be including intimacy, it could be a kiss, it could be something of a sensitive topic, it could even be familial relationships. So it's quite a broad role.
As we all know, careers in production and TV and film are very squiggly. They're rarely kind of linear. So could you give us like a brief summary of how you got to where you are now?
Yes, yeah, mine is definitely squiggly, to say the least. So I did actually start in production. A bit before that, I wanted to be an actor, and I had no idea that you could do other jobs. But when I found out about production, I was like, I think that might be more my bag. And after a few years in the production side of things, I was seeing more and more that there was a real lack of duty of care for scenes of an intimate nature or scenes that could be sensitive or alarming. And so I did some research and I found about the role. I heard about the fantastic NFTS program where you can do your certification for the role. Managed to get in unbelievably, and here I am.
Wow. Amazing. And what is that certification that you need?
So it's the intimacy coordination certification. It's a way of certifying that you've done the relevant training in order to be able to do the role. There's a few training providers in the UK, but it's quite few and far between. But honestly, it's one of those things that I think has made the role not as accessible as it should be so far.
Having to do the training, you mean?
Having to find the training, as it is, again, when there are trainings going on, the price points can be quite inaccessible, and then the regularity of the training is maybe yearly. So it's quite tricky to get your foot in the door for, say, a 12-person cohort that is run once a year, that is from a certain price point.
Okay, so they literally run just one session a year and you just have to...
Yeah, it can be some that do one a year, some that do every 6 months. There are some online courses. There are some incredible practitioners that do non-certification courses, but they're like information workshops, in-person training on specific things. But it is hefty, the training, for good reason. And even once you are certified, the training's ongoing in order to make sure that you're up to date and that you're doing best practice and that you're educating yourself throughout the role. So even though I have done my training, I'll be continuing to train for the foreseeable.
There's always things to update on.
Absolutely.
Just going back to getting your foot in the door, obviously I know you said you went into production and then you saw this potential gap in the market or this role that needed filling. But how did you get into production? Like, how did you get your foot in the door there? Because that's obviously the very first avenue, isn't it?
Yeah. So I did what everyone does, and I took to Facebook. Who knew that Facebook is
so good for getting jobs, isn't it, in the industry?
It really is, because I couldn't, on LinkedIn, I was trying, and I was occasionally maybe getting an interview here and there, but I was still stuck in a full-time job. I was trying on something called the Talent Manager, which was, again, it was great for understanding the roles, but was just not having any luck. So tried my hand at Facebook and immediately got a job on an indie film. And so that was then when I started working more in the film side of things, production side, and seeing that there were these spaces where actors were being, I don't think coerced is the right word necessarily, but they were being put in these situations that were really, really uncomfortable for them, for the crew, for everyone to be alongside and to be a part of. And I thought, I never want to be a part of a production that makes people feel that way.
Yeah, definitely.
And so, like, when you get booked on a job, for people that don't know, like, what are the first steps, or, who gets in touch with you, and then, what's the next step for you after you get booked?
It does depend. Due to the nature of the industry, a lot of the work that I have now is as a result of a recommendation, which is lovely. It's so nice when that happens. So that could be the producer, the production manager, the production coordinator, the director. Occasionally it's an actor who I've worked with before who will have passed my details on. And they say it's production side for this example. They'll reach out, they'll availability check, the usual. And then they might send over like a reference deck, or maybe a bit of a script if it's not requiring an NDA, maybe an NDA so I can read the script, to check that I'm on board with the concept and that it's something that I feel that I would be a good fit to support. It's a rare occasion that I'm sent over something that is so outlandish that I think maybe I'm not the right fit for this. But there have been times that maybe it's been a subject matter that I think maybe I'm not the best representation of this, and maybe I should pass this on to someone who is more, has the lived experience, for example, and could better support the cast and the story.
I imagine because you're working so closely with the talent, and it's lovely, obviously, to hear that you've had recommendations from actors that you've worked with, because you're, working so closely with them on set. How do you go about managing that relationship? Because I'm assuming that you meet the actors beforehand? I don't know. Like, I'm assuming you don't, but.
So I always encourage to have at least a phone call ahead of time, mainly to work out how they like to work, because ultimately a large part of what we're doing is supporting them and supporting them how they like to be supported, understanding what their process is, so that, say they have a scene partner, that we're not interjecting every 5 minutes going, "You're right, you're good." Or if they do like that, doing that and making sure that's in line with their scene partner's process as well. So yes, we have a phone call. It's usually as well to help me inform the paperwork that I make ahead of time. And sometimes we have a rehearsal as well, which is lucky. Sometimes, whether it be film or stage or commercial, you do get a rehearsal, and that is something I always advocate for as well, because then we get that FaceTime with the cast members ahead of the day, and we're then able to establish a trust there and get to know how each other operate.
And what paperwork would that be?
So chunky bits of paperwork, which, coming from a production background, is quite useful.
Yeah, we know paperwork in production.
Yes, yes, you do. Yeah. So the paperwork that we do is we can create rider language for the intimacy and the nudity, and that's off the back of the conversation. That's not paperwork that we make, but we provide the language to production. So say you were creating a commercial that required intimacy and nudity. Off the back of a conversation with cast, I would then provide the language which establishes what's been discussed ahead of time.
What they're comfortable with.
Well, it would be less what they're comfortable with and more what's agreed. So we're not popping the boundaries down on paper, but we're more saying, we have discussed that there will be, say, upper nudity for the purposes of this scene, and the cast have established that they are comfortable with this, but consent is retractable at any time, and that kind of thing, so that we've got that noted down in good time, so that it's not on the day that, say, a director goes, let's make everyone naked for this.
Yeah, and I suppose that's what has happened in the past, where you hear, like, kind of well-known actors, they speak out about it, don't they, much later on, further down the line. And
yeah, because they don't feel supported at the time to even raise a complaint or say, I don't feel comfortable with this, and that's the problem.
Absolutely.
There's no advocate for them there to be able to.
And I suppose especially because they're, like, in the early stages, so they don't feel confident to, because it could ruin your career, I suppose, like back then.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, and again, this is maybe projecting from my previous experience as an actor as well, but I think you're almost taught to just say yes and to get the job and to not present any problems. But I think that, at least I'm hoping, is dated. And now the role of intimacy hopefully is encouraging performers to think, am I comfortable with this version of this performance being set in stone forever on film, or in whatever medium it's in? And say if it's a stage show, am I comfortable with doing this action night after night after night? And just giving people a chance to consider and to be aware that it's storytelling ultimately, and there's so many ways around telling a story. It doesn't have to be a linear version of a scene. It can, if often I think that, and I've heard other intimacy coordinators say that a boundary is actually a luxury, because you get to think creatively around it and get to work around it to create something equally stunning, but in a way that everyone's proud of and comfortable with.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I'll just share a little experience of my own experience. I didn't go to drama school, but I went to study drama at university, which encompassed like acting, directing, lots of kind of other things. And one performance that we had to do, bear in mind, acting was never my special. Like, I never really wanted to be an actor. I just was like really interested in theatre and drama. And I knew I loved directing, and like that was what I was focusing on. But as part of the course, you had to act. And the scene, or like the show, involved upper nudity, which for like 19-year-olds, I think is quite wild. Like for a university performance, we were facing, or my character was facing the back of the stage. So like they would just see my back, essentially, the audience. But you still would have to be upper kind of naked for your peers, like who were on stage with you. And I raised it at the time because I felt, oh, I don't really want to do that. Like I'm not comfortable doing that. And it was met with like a, almost like, oh, you're not, for being made to feel silly for feeling that way. And yes, I remember at the time I did it, but then at the time, like just thinking, it put a really sour taste in my mouth. I didn't enjoy that performance because I just felt uncomfortable about it. And that was on such a minor level, like, that was within uni in quite a protected environment. And it wasn't like an open show that anyone could view. It was just for exam purposes. But I can't imagine what that must feel like when you are on a working commercial or paid set. You've been chosen to be the actor. You might be, new to acting, and you've got a crew of 30 people, often who are men, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And you're expected to do that, and you definitely don't have any kind of support in saying, actually, I don't feel comfortable with this. So yeah, just from my own experience, like I can see how you would kind of back down and be like, oh, okay, yeah, fine, I'll do that.
It's bonkers. I think there's such a hierarchy, and I think in some senses various settings benefit off the timings and the urgency culture of production and the theatre, and like having to do things immediately. They benefit off that in a way. And the hierarchy of a situation like that as well. It's such a shame. And that is absolutely wild to hear that you were doing that for a uni production as well, for an exam.
It was like, looking back now, I'm like, that was at the time. Obviously, there wasn't this conversation. There wasn't this, you didn't feel at all empowered to kind of have a say over what you feel comfortable sharing at all. It wasn't in the conversation, and it was almost an attitude of, oh, well, you're not an artist if you're not willing to like give this over to the performance. And that's so silly as well. Like,
I had a similar-esque experience when I was, again, younger, wanting to be an actor, doing some Meisner training. And I think this was the point for me at which I was like, okay, maybe production's more for me, because we had to do this exercise where the practitioner sat us in front of a room of our peers, again, aged like 17. And we had to basically just reveal our trauma. And it was at that point that I was like, no, thank you. And it was met with the response of, again, clearly you don't want this enough. And clearly I didn't. I think that was a moment where I was like,
you didn't want that situation, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think it was a clear sign of a boundary for me at that point, but it was framed in a way where I think I was made to feel like, oh, well, you're not an actor then.
Yeah.
You're not able to do this if you're not able to do that.
Gosh, I feel like we should name and shame these institutions.
UOB, I'm looking at you. Yeah, no, I think that is a toxic part of the industry, which I hope is dying off, is that attitude of like, you know, well, if you wanted it enough, you would do this, you know, and this is what you've chosen as your career.
Yeah.
Which, no, it isn't, you know. No. And as you say, the amazing thing about working in the creative industries is that often you have boundaries and parameters, and they create brilliant creative because you have to think differently. And so, yeah, that should not be the stock answer anymore.
Absolutely not.
What would you see if you were there at Nicole's university performance? What would you have done now as an intimacy coordinator? Like, what would you do in that scenario? Let's say that happened, you were there, she didn't feel comfortable.
So if, let's pretend all of the paperwork and whatnot has been done, I suppose I would have spoken to you and said and established at what point the discomfort came from. So if it was from doing the topless action and having nothing covering the front part of your body, and maybe offering up some modesty garments, if so I would offer up some of different degrees of coverage, where you could maybe even have just like a body tape torso, so that when you took off your clothing, you were still covered. But let's say, for the purposes of this, that it's the entirety of the toplessness, I would suggest an alternative, whether that be that you have, say, like a corset underneath, which again would get to the same point, but it would just be a different version, a different font of that action. And that way you wouldn't necessarily have to do the same degree of nudity, but the same point would be made.
And I think the other thing really to flag as well is that obviously those pre-discussions are so important, because you don't know what someone's experienced in their private life or in their personal life in their past. And so being asked to do something where, yes, 90% of people might be comfortable doing that, but someone may have had an experience which has given them a trauma or a negative, connotation, and that's so important to discover,
Absolutely.
But also it's fair enough to just be like, I don't want to be nude in front of lots of people because I don't feel comfortable.
It's not a standard 9 to 5 to have to do something like that.
So you mentioned that you would maybe give Nicole a modesty garment. So what versions of modesty garments are there? Like, what exists out there? We don't know. Obviously, maybe like a skin-coloured thong, but what else? So
there's some really brilliant modesty garment shops that are being, I think, founded and created in the UK. One that I use frequently is called Intermask, and they invent different garments because they themselves are intimacy practitioners. Okay. So they are then able to go, there's a gap in the market for this one.
So they're like bespoke, essentially, for specific... Well,
they can be close to bespoke. They have different skin tones, they have different sizes, and obviously there's different kinds for different genitalia as well. So there are nipple covers, different shapes, different sizes, skin tones, different kinds of adhesives for, say, an underwater scene, which there's more than you'd expect. Different types of thongs, some that are strapless, so that you have to tape them front and back, both for different kinds of genitalia there as well, different skin colours, different amounts of coverage. So there's ones that are maybe, say, closer to a brief, and then there are those that are, I'd say, minimal coverage, but cover the areas that the artist would desire to be covered. But yeah, it's an art form, and there's some people doing astounding work there, and it's ever evolving as well, which is really cool to see.
There are, maybe we don't include this, but aren't there ones where it's just like just the hairpiece?
Oh, merkins.
Well? Would that be a modesty garment?
So I think that would be closer, and I might be wrong here, but I think they might be closer to SFX.
Okay, fine.
Because
so that's not part of the intimacy role.
It's something we can support on. Again, I think there would be rider language to support that. Again, because if you're getting a merkin, then you're getting let's say, a cut, a shape, a size, a style, if you will.
So I've never heard the word merkin, so that's interesting.
Yes, it's fun. And so, you would, I think, it wouldn't be out of the question to be brought into those discussions to support, just to make sure that the cast have sign off on what's happening downstairs.
I think like it's very obvious why there's a need for the intimacy coordinator role. I think we've spoken about that now, but you know, why would you, in your own words, like what would you say is the importance of your role, and through your own experience of doing that job, what have you seen that has made you kind of go, yes, this is exactly why I'm here?
That's a really good question. I think kind of what I was saying earlier about the urgency culture on set. I think it's very fast paced. It can be quite overwhelming. And I think having someone there whose dedicated role is to make sure that someone is feeling supported through what's already very vulnerable. It's vulnerable in itself, being in front of a camera and performing. And again, it's usually quite a large room of people, quite daunting. So the added layer of there being some form of intimacy, possibly nudity, is that tenfold. So making sure that there's someone there dedicated to supporting you through that, whether that be through making sure that you feel like the action in itself is effective and safe and repeatable, or whether it be to support the director in giving notes as well, so that they're able to get the creative that they're keen to achieve in a way that, again, is safe and is diplomatic, again, super vulnerable. So you wouldn't want someone going in with like brazen critique, especially because that could have an impact on the performance. Equally, massively important for production. Imagine doing a stunt without a stunt person. That's risky business. So imagine doing something of an intimate nature without the risk assessment support, without the mitigation for that. And in this instance, we do provide a risk assessment. So we're there to be able to make sure that we have considered the risks ahead of time and done what we can to make sure that the people that are involved feel safe.
Because I suppose it's not, I mean, it's mainly the cast, isn't it? But I suppose you could have some discomfort amongst the crew. And
100%. Yeah, I always make sure that there's an information sheet sent out to production and to be distributed to the crew with the closed set protocol and with my info, so that then they're able to reach out if they've got any questions or concerns. And then the scenes of an intimate nature are usually marked out quite clearly. But when we do our safety briefing to start off with, it's then a chance for me or for the first AD to flag that there will be scenes and the content warnings as a part of that, so that I can then maybe put out some feelers, check in with the heads of department. Sound is a big one that I will always make sure to check in with, because often if there's a boom operator, they have to be quite close in the action. And if it's something distressing, they have to hear that on a loop. So making sure that everyone that's involved there has had a chance to consider and think, and if they need to take a breather, that they can, so that people are aware of the safe word, so that if the safe word is uttered, that people know to take a beat. But yeah, it's there for everyone, but not to take away from the fact that there are also brilliant welfare officers on set to cater to that as well.
And for people that don't know, what is a closed set?
A closed set is when we basically will drastically reduce who is in the room as much as possible. Depending on the risk, it could be also a sensitive set, but primarily a closed set will be minimal people in the room, only essential people on monitors. A lot of the time now, people obviously use devices with cameras, so making sure that there's either something closing their cameras or a way to make sure that the camera is not visible on both sides. And if there are, say, like a script supervisor or people that do require monitors to do their job, to make sure that any screen grabs, anything that's captured is first of all ran past the people who it includes, and second of all is deleted at the end of the job.
You're there primarily to be an advocate for the performer, and that, you know, that's essential, because as we know, performers historically haven't felt comfortable to speak up to the director and say, actually, I don't feel comfortable with this, because it would be met with brushing off at the best, at the worst, maybe some anger or some frustration. And I suppose what I'm trying to ask is because now you're in that conduit role in the middle, perhaps I imagine it again, and maybe I'm thinking the worst, it's easier for the director to become frustrated with you because you are now in that middle position, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely times that there's been resistance to the role. And again, I think a large part of the training is understanding how to navigate those conversations in a way that feels productive and not necessarily argumentative for the sake of it. I think it will just stem from misunderstandings surrounding the role and maybe misconceptions that what we're saying is just for the sake of saying it rather than to protect someone else's boundaries. But again, the resistance has primarily come from when people don't understand what the role is. So, for example, I have had a producer before say, when talking about a director, just saying, just don't say no to him. Just don't say no to him. And I've had to say, with all due respect, no was never said. Suggestions and alternatives have been given. And it's never been me just outright saying no just for the sake of it. But like I said, I think that was a misunderstanding where people maybe just thought I was just saying no.
Or perhaps thinking, oh, well, we've done the due diligence because we've hired an intimacy coordinator.
Exactly.
And not wanting to do any of the, the work that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think an interesting element of this role is the way that we do the work is not just personality based, but obviously we work very closely with cast and with crew. And I think a lot of the time your relationships with the people that you're working with depend on your interpersonal skills and how you relate to people. But in any job, you're not going to get along with everyone. Sometimes people clash. There's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of egos, and there's a lot going on set. And so sometimes there's people that have all of the right intentions, but there's just personalities that for whatever reason don't gel.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I don't even have to imagine.
We've been there.
You mentioned earlier that, you get asked to be an intimacy coordinator on film and television for a variety of different reasons. So it could be nudity, it could just be a kiss, but you also mentioned kind of familial situations. And that's something that I hadn't realised would necessarily need an intimacy coordinator. So can you kind of maybe give an example of that sort of familial situation?
Absolutely, yes. So an example could be, say there is a father and a daughter cast and the daughter is, let's say, 5. Again, there would be a chaperone for obvious reasons, and a parent or guardian, but then equally just to make sure, say for example there was like a kiss on the cheek, at that point there could be an intimacy coordinator involved, just for added precaution, for added safety and peace of mind for parent or guardian, for chaperone.
And also probably for the actor playing the father, because
Absolutely.
they may feel uncomfortable. They may not know that if they don't have children.
Exactly.
It's good to have someone else to be like, okay, this is, what you do. This is, and again, making everyone kind of aware ahead of time, so it's not, a shock or to anyone.
Exactly. It's there for everyone in that case. Another situation could be, say, a birth scene. Again, there would be, say, a birthing consultant and there would be a plethora of other essential crew members there. But if there was maybe a prosthetic, or if there wasn't a prosthetic, whatever we see, whatever we don't see, the way that we showcase that action and that moment and that scene, there have been intimacy coordinators used for scenes of that nature as well.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about parent-child on screen, but that does involve probably hugging or closer interaction than you would have.
Contact.
And they are strangers essentially.
Yeah, breastfeeding as well. Again,
Yeah, cool, yeah.
All sorts. One of the biggest elements of the job is confidentiality. So when I'm having these calls, whether it be with cast or crew or director, production, is to make sure that people know that what we're talking about isn't just going to be me going straight to the director saying exactly what's just been said. And when I'm writing the paperwork, I make sure it's clear that what we talk about isn't going on there. It's just the actions in line with the scene. But it's a big part of the job, and I think it's something that, again, is essential for the working relationships for those scenes. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of like fun or interesting anecdotes you can share without kind of revealing who anyone is?
I think I've got one that would be okay for me to talk about, which is I had a fantastic job at the start of the year where I was working to help create Dante's Inferno, which, if you're familiar with, is writhing, nude, intertwined bodies.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not
you
familiar.
know, that old chestnut. Dante's Inferno, right? So it was a really fascinating job. It really used every single ounce of my brain power. And what we had to do was we had about 15 cast members. Production were incredible. They gave me so much time and so much space to chat with absolutely everyone individually and give them a lot of time on the day, ahead of the day. And what we did was essentially worked out who was comfortable with being fully nude for those moments, and then had to make sure that everyone who had stated a boundary or wasn't comfortable for whatever reason had the right degree of coverage. And then we had what's called barriers galore. Barriers everywhere, which meant that people were not actually in direct contact, but looked like they were. And it was about essentially placing people in a way that they were seemingly intertwined, but were not. So maybe it would be like their legs, their ankles touching, their hands, their arms crossed, to create this visceral and intense and evocative, hellish image. Again, with the awareness that it was a very all-intensive context as well. So that was a job. But it was really worthwhile and really a real reminder of the work and how to do so safely and carefully, but still artistically.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, are there any creative ways that you kind of, do intimacy? I suppose, like, you were talking about the barriers, so I suppose it's like using kind of like bedding and pillows.
What is a barrier? Is it just is that a term to...
So a barrier is essentially, it could be a pillow. It could be, there's instances where it's, say, like a semi-blown up small Pilates ball, which will create a bit of bounce as well. So if it isn't seen of an intimate nature, then it aids the action slightly. A lot of the time it comes from the vision of the director as well, and me then translating that through the boundaries of the cast. So say we were doing a scene where there was someone topless facing away, it would be navigating the angles so that if they were, say, wearing modesty garments on their top half, we would be able to see what we needed to see to tell the story without revealing too much, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So just wanted to ask, like, is there anything that you think kind of needs to change in the industry to kind of like make it a more positive experience, I suppose?
That is an amazing question. How long have you got? No, I love it here. I'm very happy to be here. But I think a big thing is timing. And I think that's what creates this sense of urgency and this pressure. And it definitely does have an impact on everyone's mentality and well-being and welfare. Obviously, I understand that time is money, and they'll have locations for set amounts of time. But I think that layer of pressure is what puts the cloud of dissatisfaction maybe, or just, again, it dampens the atmosphere on set. I think that's a big one. And then there's not enough welfare coordinators out there. I don't get to work with them enough. I think, again, that in the same way that intimacy coordinators feel like an investment in the welfare of cast and production and directors, I think welfare coordinators feel like a gift to the crew in that same way. So I definitely advocate for them all the way.
Usually added to the producer role, that one.
We've kind of already, I think, maybe said the peak, maybe not though, of your kind of the best thing that you've you've worked on, or the thing that you're most proud of. Perhaps it was the Dante's Inferno that you spoke about, but we always like to end with, you know, the most challenging moment, or like perhaps the lowest moment in your career, and then your kind of standout best moment.
Does it have to be intimacy, or can it be the entirety?
It could be the entirety.
But in film realm.
Yeah.
So I've got one that kind of answers both, but then I'll also add a little one on for intimacy afterwards.
Okay.
Peak and pit at one point, I think, was quitting my job in advertising because it was a really intense job. And like I said, the culture wasn't easy. What we were making, who we were making it for, not fun. So I had a real movie moment of getting to leave that job and say, in a very nice, very measured way, but also like really get across, like, they were like, don't be rash. And I was going, this isn't rash. I don't like what we make. I don't like how we make it. I don't like who we make it for. And I don't like how we treat the people who help us make what we make. And got to leave. But obviously there were real highs and lows with that moment in that setting. So that was peak and pit number
relief.
one. Yeah. Honestly, it was overwhelming. I had to go and get gravy and chips afterwards to just deal with the emotions.
Chips basically just deal with
Solve any
all
problem.
problems.
I'm going to add that onto my answer about what makes film better. Chips. That too.
Good chips.
Good quality chips, and also welfare. And then the other peak moment was, and again, there's a little pit attached to this, but I had the most incredible job working on a beautiful music video that looked like a painting. It looked like Bridgerton. It was absolutely divine. It was sunny. I think it was maybe in like a National Trust property.
Wow.
It was absolutely ethereal. The crew were brilliant, and the director had so much trust in the intimacy process and really like took me along every step of the way, and was like the most creatively fulfilling job I've probably ever had to date.
Wow.
The pit is it never got released.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to.
Yeah,
So often
devastated.
the case with
That's
music
so
videos,
frustrating.
especially, they just can them, and you're like,
I know.
all this amazing work.
Yeah, I was absolutely devastated. But I mean, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You just think, you spent all that money.
Yeah.
Why aren't you releasing it?
Yeah. So yeah.
That is gutting. And actually that happens a lot. And I think maybe that's something we should do a whole episode about, because everyone
Canned episodes.
canned, yeah, because everyone has been there. I remember the first time I produced something that was canned. Oh, I couldn't sleep for like weeks. I was so devastated. I was just, you know, it's all this like energy and time and work and effort that you put in. It's just like poof.
It's like a period of mourning to be like that. All of that brain power.
I don't think I've ever worked on anything that's been canned.
All right, show off.
Maybe because there's just too much money behind it. So, well,
Yeah, if they canned big TV series, that would be like
Devastating.
a couple £1 million of deficit. Yeah, but thank you so much, and I can't wait to see what you do going forward.
Thank you.
Definitely keep in touch.
Yes, definitely.
And where can people find you if they want to
On
find you?
socials, I operate so much on socials. I think my handle is just my name, which is Stella Moss.
wow.
There's a lot. There's a lot
I
there.
learned a lot about merkins. Not
about
actually didn't learn that much about merkins, but it's a word that I will never forget now.
I'm going to start calling you Merkin. Just in the office.
Fine by me.
No, I think amazing stuff. I mean, it is funny. It is, you know, we can laugh at it, but also it's a role that's so needed on set. And I think Stella really showcased that in the way that she really cares about the work she's doing, you can tell. And also, you know, I love her positive approach to it. It's not that she's policing, it's that she's protecting and coming up with creative solutions. I think that's super important as well. And it's not just enough to have an intimacy coordinator there. You need to actually listen to what they're telling you and make the changes.
Yeah. I mean, I have actually worked with intimacy coordinators before, and I actually just feel kind of relief, I think, when we have somebody like that on the set, because you just know that you are keeping everyone safe, especially the actors, but, you know, also crew, because people can feel uncomfortable. And yeah, yeah, I just don't know how people did it before.
Oh, well, horribly.
Yeah, obviously horribly, but you just sort of think like, you know, people in my position, like as a line producer, you know, must have had just this anxiety, you know?
Yeah, I mean, or they didn't, which is worse, you know, like I think you kind of underestimate your own personal compassion and how kind of thoughtful you are as a person. I think not every line producer feels like that, especially in, you know, decades past.
True.
But yes, for sure, I think it kind of
Thankfully, times are changing.
well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Onset Secrets with myself,
you.
Nicole, and Merkin here. As always, please subscribe if you enjoyed the episode. Give us a like, a share, and comment on kind of what you thought. Did you learn something new? Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks, bye.